Gregory for sparing this time and making himself available for this session. Thank you so much. So before we begin, I would just like to very briefly put the things in context. So, the reason we are here is all of us are facing a lot of mental stress at this point of. In fact, India and South Africa are other two countries in the world which are facing complete partial shutdown. We have been inside our houses from 24th of March. And I tell you, in India, the social media, the television, the news channels are very loud, and they are just bombarding us with a lot of negative news and what's happening around. And indeed, what's happening around is not very, very positive. So a lot of us are feeling very anxious. We have high level of anxiety, stress, and insecurity, how the new world will be when this lockdown opens up. Many of us are facing pressure at the workplace, on our salaries, whatnot. So we are definitely missing a positive mindset and a growth mindset. And I know who better than Gregory can talk about it. So guys, just to give a little perspective, I have had the pleasure of and honor of working with Gregory when I was at Hastings in Sweden. So he's a wonderful guy. He's one of the best-selling authors, and he has a very unique expertise of letting people, kind of reach their potential. We know who we are, but he's one person who helps us reach there. So I always say Gregory is not somebody who gives us a solution, but our lives are like a jigsaw puzzle, and he helps us putting together those missing pieces and, complete the puzzle and reach where we are. A lot of time when, during my career, when I was facing issues or, when my thoughts were getting entangled, or I would say I was getting clouded, he was the guy who used to help me dust off my brain and, get those clouds away and have a clear vision and thinking. So I won't take much time. I would rather begin by asking Gregory to tell a little bit about himself. He's had a very, I would say, difficult, easy, good, bad kind of a journey throughout. And he's seen it all. He's been there. So let us know a little bit more about you before we take a deep dive into what we are here to discuss. So I leave it to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Asim. And welcome, gentlemen. It is really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and to be asked to do this. There's nothing that I enjoy more than helping people to have a better life. And if I can contribute to that for you in any way with this experience, then it's worth all the time that we can give to it. So thank you for being here and putting your time into being here today. I appreciate it. And yeah, as Asim was saying, I grew up in a very have and have not environment. My father was very working class. He was a janitor for the state of California. And that meant that he mopped floors and emptied trash cans and, tidied things up at a state institution. I grew up in an environment of lack. Where I grew up was the center of wine country in California. And so a lot of the other kids around me, their parents owned wineries or were doctors or worked in the financial sector, was not very far from Silicon Valley. I grew up during the Silicon Valley boom, knew lots of kids whose parents were working in Silicon Valley, and they'd make the long commute and, working for Oracle and a lot of the earlier big tech companies. And so I was very aware from a young age that there was somewhat of a difference in where people were in their lives. And I noticed that, for kids that grew up in certain environments, they ended up in certain places, and kids that grew up in other environments maybe ended up in some other places. But I also became aware that some people that grow up in an environment of lack can learn things that can change their life and that can change their station in life. And in a lot of cultures, there's this belief that, well, you will experience for the rest of your life exactly what you're born into, because that's what the divine has appointed for you, right? That if you are the son of a farmer, well, you're meant to be a farmer. If you're the son of a merchant, well, then you'll grow up to be a merchant. And but I saw individuals and became exposed to individuals that it didn't matter where they came from, that they developed this belief that they could be and do anything that they decided that they wanted for their life, and that they didn't have to be locked in to a box or locked into this predestined mold, that they could break out of that. And so I started studying those types of individuals and wanting to know what they knew that I didn't know, and that led me to a transformation in my life where I just really started devouring anything that I could get my hands on that was about developing human potential. And that meant spending time in used bookstores, because I was a broke college kid, when I got my first copy of Think and Grow Rich. And I was, young, married, and had been exposed to some great ideas, but I didn't really have any tools. And so I went out and started getting all the tools that I could get my hands on for 10 cents, 20 cents, 25 cents, whatever it was. If the title suggested in some way, that there was information in there that could help me to have a better life, I wanted to get my hands on it. And then I started discovering who some of these personalities were, and by reading their books. And then I started getting into audios, and then my car became a bigger education center for me than the university that I was attending. And I was the first kid in my family, the first person to attend university. My father never did. My brother never did. My grandfather never did. None of my family ever attended university, and I was the first. But I started to realize that the best education that I was getting was from those books and those audios. And when I finally finished university, I was working in the communications sector. I was a copywriter for Clear Channel Communication. They're a worldwide information and broadcast company. And I just started to feel stuck, like I wasn't fulfilling my purpose. I really believed that my purpose was to help people have a better life. And I made a jump. I left that industry, and I took a risk, applied for a job with the Covey Company. Stephen R. Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and went into the coaching industry. And it exposed me to an opportunity to do some coaching for Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. I ended up being his top producer the first year that they launched his coaching company, which was the Success Principles Coaching. And then was working alongside a lot of guys that were coaching for Robert Kiyosaki, because the same company was providing coaching for the Rich Dad program. Got to do some work with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then made a move in my career over to working with Joe Vitale, Dr. Joe Vitale, who does a lot of work around what's called Ho'oponopono. And I really started diving into more spiritual principles around personal growth and law of attraction and manifesting and everything that goes with that. And then ended up writing my first book called Attracting Miracles. Dr. Joe Vitale wrote the 8th chapter of that book. He was my co-author. It became an overnight bestseller. Launched my own coaching brand, and it was through those opportunities that I actually ended up in Sweden, because the gentleman that runs Heston's, that is the owner, Jan Rita, really had a big vision for what he wanted to do and the difference that he wanted to make in the world. But in order to do that, he needed somebody with my skill set in the organization. And so I made the decision to leave everything behind in America and moved my family, my wife, and our 7 children at the time. We now have 8. And we came to Sweden, and I've been here changing minds and changing lives ever since.
So from the Big Apple to the Sweet Apple, Sweden, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very nice place. So I don't know, how are you experiencing this pandemic? Like I said, we are definitely feeling the pressure of it. So when I ask you, how do you see this whole situation which is going around?
That's an interesting question, and and I don't want to get too much into what I think is the reason behind it or who's behind it,
Sure.
because it's probably a different conversation. But when the whole thing started, I was on a holiday with my family in Spain, and I tend to believe that we experience, that what we experience inside of ourselves gets mirrored in the outside. And I have not really, and I don't want to sound, crazy or arrogant, but I really haven't been as affected as maybe a lot of other people have. And it's because I made I made a comment early on when I got back from Spain. People were asking me, "Oh, what was it like? Was it just crazy?" And really, I didn't see in my observation anything that was being shown in the media. And for me, that was a big disconnect, because I was telling people, "Nah, I was just in Spain. I just got back to Sweden like the day before, and it wasn't like that. I didn't see shelves being emptied, and I didn't see people wearing masks, and the museums were full, and the city centers were full. Like, what I was observing was not lining up with what was being seen in the media. And I think it goes back to a statement that I made, that I said, I'm choosing not to participate. I'm not going to participate in what's going on in the media. And so everything that I was seeing was not lining up with what's in the media. And call it crazy, but Sweden has been a lone wolf in how they've been dealing with this. And Sweden didn't go on lockdown. Now, they've done some responsible things with social distancing and taking extra precautions and cleaning the hands and not touch your face. But the rest of the pandemonium that has been seen in the rest of the world, it hasn't been my personal experience, but I've been exposed to the experiences of other people. And that has been interesting, because, for what they're going through and what I'm going through, I have not experienced the same level of suffering. And really, that's going to be the root of what I'm going to talk about as we talk, is about suffering, and how this COVID-19 thing has translated into suffering for people, because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a really high level of suffering. And if you've ever read or studied the ancient mystics, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, you understand that suffering is optional, right? That it's not pain. Pain is mandatory. We're all going to experience types of pain, but whether or not that pain will translate into suffering, it's an individual choice. And we'll talk about that as we go.
Yeah, that's very nicely said. In fact, I was also reading a very interesting article about somebody who's like very top of the line professional in our organization, and he said, guys, we are in the same storm, but I cannot say we are in the same boat. Everybody is having a different kind of scenario. So something very, very interesting that you said. We will experience pain, but yes, it's our choice to suffer or not to suffer. So like I said, looking into this scenario, there's a lot of insecurity that's going around in the mind of people. We don't know this whole world when this world will open up after this lockdown, or
right.
How things would be. And we have been told very, very clearly that we will have to coexist with the situation of COVID-19. So coronavirus is here to stay, it's not going away. So all of us are like in just two minds, and all confused, baffled, and anxious at the same point of time how things will be. So how should we cope up from a mindset perspective with kind of a confusing, imposing kind of a situation? So what would you suggest how to take it out on?
So I'm gonna answer your question and go into this with a question for you.
Please.
How much of what's happening, or how much of what you're seeing in the media, and how much of what is being told that we should do and what we need to do, and what things are going to look like going forward, how much of that do you really have control over?
I would say very little. I can only
Very little. That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can only control myself, like you said, washing my hands, not touching my face. But there's a lot which we don't have control on. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. So if you look at what we're being told that we must do, and what we're told, we must experience, just like a grain of sand, many people are going to have a different perspective. They're going to see that grain of sand differently. But really, the only thing that we have control over is what's happening in here, right? What's happening here and here.
Yes.
And so we have to define, in some ways, well, what's the experience, right? If it's causing anxiety, if it's causing depression, if it's causing worry or doubt or fear, whatever is happening, however we're responding to what's happening on the outside, we have to look inside and say, okay, there's so much of what you just talked about that I do not have control over, right? So I have to really figure out, well, what do I have control over? And I have to separate the two, because my experience going forward, governments and leaders and media, they're all telling us that things are going to be this certain way. And like you said, we can be in the same pond, but not have to be in the same boat. And so in order to know how we move forward, we have to define, what is suffering, right? And once we define it, we have to decide if we're going to participate in it or not, right? Some people, they don't know they could choose out of it. They're just doing what the media says, and they're getting panicky, and they don't understand that their experience is going to be the result of their own decisions, because they may not be aware. They may not even be aware that they can make a decision. And so in order to know what the solution is.
I'll just interrupt here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your statement is very nice. We will have pain, but it is for us to choose whether we are suffering or not. How to identify? What are the symptoms to identify that we are actually imposing suffering on us, which we can choose?
Yeah, very good. Great. That's perfect question.
Let us identify, because a lot of time we are suffering and we don't even realize that we are suffering.
That's right. Absolutely. So the way that I define suffering, and people may have a different way, but the way that I define it, that I'll put out there, is that it's any feeling, it's any thinking or feeling experience that is less than what we would reasonably choose for ourselves, right? If you're feeling anxiety, would you choose to feel anxiety, Asim?
No, it just comes by itself.
Yeah. You wouldn't choose to feel anger, right? You wouldn't choose to feel stress if, there are some situations where maybe it's beyond individual control. And so I use the term reasonably, right? If somebody is struggling with mental illness, sometimes they're not in a reasonable place to decide what their experience is going to be. But for most people, it comes down to what we would reasonably choose for ourselves, and identifying those experiences that we wouldn't choose. If I notice, right? If I notice that that I'm feeling anxiety, if I notice that I'm feeling fear, if I notice that I'm feeling anger, or whatever it is, if I notice it, and I can recognize, that's less than what I would choose for myself. And then that opens me up to some different experiences. So first we have to define suffering. Okay. So it's any feeling experience that is less than what we would reasonably choose for ourselves. And sometimes life goes so fast, right, that we don't notice it consciously. Are you a moviegoer? Do you like movies?
I think most of the audience here do, yeah.
Okay. Have you ever watched a movie or watched maybe special features in the movie where they show scenes that were recorded or filmed and there's no music in the background?
Mm-hmm.
Very bland, right? Each of us has a soundtrack. It's like the soundtrack in a movie. When you're watching the movie, you don't really notice that it's there unless you make the conscious decision to tune into it. but it is there and it guides your experience in the movie. The way that you respond to the dialogue, to the action, to movement, to the environment. So much of that is determined by what the soundtrack is. And your feelings, your feeling experience is the soundtrack of your life. And what goes on the inside is going to be mirrored in what you experience on the outside. And so the very first thing is just to become aware of what the soundtrack is, right? Become aware of what the feelings are. We don't have to know where they came from at first. In fact, sometimes we don't even have to know ever, well, why is it there? But it is important to recognize what the internal soundtrack is that represents suffering.
So very, very rightly said. I think our internal dialogue is very important. We need to have a very clear internal dialogue with ourselves, because what's happening inside, like you very said, is a mirror to what things will happen outside. And
absolutely.
In line with your book also, Attracting Miracles, that if you start thinking about something in a very strong and a positive manner, those things start happening, those miracles start happening. So that's very interesting. So we would come back to what you were saying. Sorry for making you digress.
No, that's fine. Jump in anytime. This is a great dialogue.
So you were trying to put now that suffering and pain in a perspective, so that we can understand better, and we know when's the time to say, hey, stop, and take few steps back and say, I choose to suffer from this pain. I choose to maybe learn from this pain, or I need to grow from this pain and not suffer from it. So how and when we can do this, that we realize that this is our moment, this is our time. Okay, I choose not to get into this.
That's a great question. One of the great opportunities, I think, that a lot of this social distancing has had, a lot of this lockdown has had, is it's given people time to slow down and to put the brakes on a little bit, maybe more time for reflection. Because if you're a busy individual, and you're an account manager, or you're working in accounting, or you're working in engineering, whatever it is, people are busy, and when it's business as usual, we're generally just focused on, well, what's the next thing that I need to get done today? And we're not taking the time that we need to get introspective. And so I think, we're presented with a unique opportunity with all of the social distancing and with, these different types of lockdowns, because it puts us in a position where we can choose to behave differently. And one of those vital behaviors is learning to check in with yourself, right? Learning to just, it doesn't matter what's happening or where you are, even setting an alarm for yourself, throughout the day, many times a day, that when that alarm goes, or when your phone buzzes, or whatever the tool is that you're using to remind you to check in, that you just stop everything and just get present, right? What am I feeling right now? Because if you don't choose to look at the soundtrack, if you don't choose to look at the dialogue, it goes on anyway, regardless of what you're focused on consciously. You may be focused on adding figures. You may be focused on closing a deal, right? Or you may be focused on, setting a date, for dinner at a restaurant with a significant other. Like, there's all these other things that you're focused on, but that soundtrack keeps going. And if you understand how much effect or impact that soundtrack has on your life, then you start to realize how important it is that you take the time to check in with that soundtrack, because it's going to keep going, and it's going to determine what you experience on the outside. And either it can go on autopilot, or you can start to take control. And I think that's one of the beautiful opportunities that we have, is that we now have time that we can slow down, start checking in, and see what's actually there.
Great. So maybe we are reaching towards the middle of our session. I would just let the audience also to kind of open in, and while we kind of session. So I will just introduce the different audience that we have, the variety of people. So
Yeah.
someone who just unmuted himself, his name is Dr. Saifuddin. He takes business management courses for Lucknow University. So Lucknow is my hometown, a beautiful town up north of India. And then we also have Mr. Gautam Puri. So this gentleman is the head of treasury at Samsung India, the guy who manages all the big bucks in the company. His zeros after the numbers are like just very difficult to keep track of. And then we also have Siddhant Shivkumar, who works at Hans Grohe, and he is the business head for Sri Lanka and Maldives. So very exotic locations to work with. So guys, I would say at any point of time when you have a question, please unmute yourself and put forward your question while me and Gregory are kind of continuing our discourse. So please feel free to jump in.
Uh, Hi,
Yes,
everybody. I have a question.
yes, please.
Please.
We reciprocate the feelings that we receive. We replicate the emotions that we receive.
Mm.
If we are constantly in a society where we are exposed to so many negative events right now, and take the
Mm.
scenario for India, where the sufferings of the people due to this lockdown, due to large-scale unemployment, are
Mm.
very widely being reported all over the world. So how we can take control? We are not in a position to get removed from this particular scenario. And when the society is affected and you are constantly being exposed to such news and events, so definitely the mind will take on towards the
Mm.
negative things. So
Yep.
what would you advise on that front?
That's a beautiful question. So, for those of you that like systems and mathematics, I'm going to give you an equation. And so, write down this equation. So first, experience, right? Or it could be experience or event. And so it's E, right?
E for
So,
experience. Yeah.
yep, E for experience or event. And then a plus sign, M for meaning, right? So experience plus meaning equals F for feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So the meaning that you give to an experience, the meaning that you give is what's going to drive the feeling, right? The feeling is the outcome. And so the meaning that many people have given to this COVID-19 situation evolves around doom and gloom. Now, I have been exposed to other individuals who've given a different meaning. They've seen this as opportunity. This is a great opportunity for transformation. This is a great opportunity for positive change. This is a great opportunity to change the way that we connect. If you look at the amount of digital transformation that is going on in business because of this COVID-19, those companies that have been innovative and have seen this as more of an opportunity than an obstacle, they're going to have a completely different experience. And so it's the meaning that you give. When you look out and you see what's happening, it's the meaning that you give to the experience that's going to determine how you feel about it. Now, you're not going to be able to control the meaning for other people. You might be able to influence it and offer them perspective based on the meaning that you are choosing to give. And so the key is, and as you probably know, that like attracts like. But once you adjust the meaning so that it is something that you see benefit in, you will start to attract other individuals into your existence that share the same meaning. And so you'll start to find that, wow, these people that I'm interacting with aren't really freaked out. They're not really anxious or depressed about it. And that will start to govern your experience. All you can do is offer insight and influence, but it comes down to the meaning. And that's the best answer that I have is if you adjust the meaning that you give to the experience, it will change the way that you feel about it.
So experience plus meaning is equal to feeling.
That's right.
Wow.
And feeling plus subconscious mind equals belief. When that meaning and feeling go into the subconscious, that's how your beliefs are shaped and developed. There is no belief without a feeling, right? The only rational, the only logical to the subconscious is emotional. I mean, it doesn't do, the subconscious doesn't rationalize. It doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't analyze the experience. It just goes off of whatever the emotion is that you've attached to it. And so all of these things that you see and that you hear, all of these representations are symbols. And it's the feeling that's attached to those symbols, right? That's the meaning that goes into the subconscious, and it forms a belief. And if you believe that this COVID-19 thing is doom and gloom, that's what your experience is going to reflect. But if you believe that there's opportunity in it, if you see it as something that can ultimately bring value, then you're going to have a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Nice perspective. So I still remember, Gregory, you have always spoke about when I was at Hastings and we were to attend your session, you talked about a growth mindset,
Yeah.
mindset which is focused towards growth. And in different kind of scenarios, circumstances. I still remember 2 years back, when we started interacting, that was a time when the organization has almost kind of, I would say, reached a saturation point in sales and revenues and everything. And then all of a sudden, you came up with an idea that we have to double our sales, 2x, and everybody was like, oh, this cannot happen. But yes, after a year, we were very close to that number. So you help people understand the importance and how to achieve a growth mindset. So how that growth mindset can be applied in a situation like now? Completely agree.
Great question.
Yeah,
Great
that
question.
our belief and the meaning that we give to it is very important. So the scenario.
Yeah. So so what it comes to, the way that I learned it, and at the time I didn't even know the term growth mindset. I just started to see that the difference between people that were performing at a high level versus people that were performing at a low level in all areas of their life. Maybe they had high level relationships or not so high level relationships. Maybe they were performing high in their finances or not so high. Or the difference comes down to what you perceive as how this whole life experience works, right? So a growth mindset is a belief that I have control over my circumstances. Now, and that starts with taking 100% responsibility. And I'm going to dive a little bit, and this gets a little bit philosophical, but it's important to understand the difference between responsibility and blame, right? And
Yes.
as I was growing up as a child, I think I didn't really understand the difference between responsibility and blame. So I'll explain it using a metaphor. So if you're a painter and you spend your lifetime painting on this canvas of yours, your life is a canvas, and you have somebody or something happens and somebody comes along and puts a mark on your canvas that you didn't ask for. You don't necessarily even want it there. You don't like the way that it looks, right? But now it's on your canvas. The difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset is how you choose to approach that mark on your canvas. A growth mindset says, okay, well, this is my canvas, right? And now that this mark is on my canvas, I can choose what to do with it. A fixed mindset is somebody that will either try to paint over it. I can't do anything about it, so I'm going to try to paint over it. Or they'll just point at it for their whole life and complain that it's there and say, oh, that person put that mark there. And now, I can't have a nice experience in my life because that person put the mark there, right? oh, now my whole environment is ruined because that person put the mark there. That's blame. And that's victimhood. I didn't put it there, but I recognize that now that it's there, ooh, I could do something about it. I can take control. That's responsibility. I didn't put it there, but it's in my possession, which is almost as good as ownership, right? And so now that it's there, I'm going to choose what to do with it. And I realize that my whole life is filled with experiences that I get to choose how I'm going to deal with it. A fixed mindset says I don't have any control and I just react to everything. A growth mindset says I do have control and I'm going to respond to everything.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Gautam and Siddhant, anything would you like to ask?
Yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah, this is Gautam here.
the money guy.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Gautam,
Yeah.
if you want,
Hi.
you can put your video on
So,
also,
Downey,
guys.
you're.
Guys, you can put your videos on. I'm
Oh,
sorry. I was doing it to save bandwidth so that we have good quality, but please feel free to show yourselves. I know most of us are very tidy during this time, but still, okay. Yes, Gautam.
sorry for the shave.
You look
So,
great.
Mr. Downey, your voice is very impressive
Oh, thank
and
you.
convincing. I have one question. So these days, as a parent, we feel, our children who are
Mm,
not used to, these kind of circumstance, they have seen internet, they have seen malls, they have seen movies,
mm,
but they have not seen this kind of a stress, you know, this kind of uncertainty. Uh, Even, if you see, a person getting ill and he's being taken by a doctor, and you see the uniform of doctors is totally, bluish and they are totally covered. The children are getting feared. They don't understand. They don't. I expect them. They ask some question to us, but they don't. But I can see the fear in their mind. What is going on? Whether this will last long, and there are many questions to how as a parents. I can understand my parents, expecting me to, adjust to this kind of a situation, but
mm.
children, especially, below 15 years, uh, they have a different mindset. They never expect these kind of situations to come in their lifetime. Now, since this has happened, so I think they will see these kind of situations, coming more frequently. So how as a parent, we can guide them, we can
Mm.
help them so that they are ready for these kind of situations in their lifetime.
So, do you like cars? Are you a car guy?
Oh, yes, big time.
Gautam, do you like cars?
Yeah, within my budget.
Okay. So if you were going to choose a car, and I'm just going to I like to put everything into metaphors or pictures because it's easier to conceptualize. If you were going to educate your child about what kind of car is the most amazing car, right?
Yeah.
You could, choose a Diplomat or you could choose a Ferrari, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you describe a Diplomat, okay, maybe not the best car, but there's lots of them in India, right? It's a
Yeah.
popular car. It served
Diplomat is
India well.
ambassador you're talking about, right?
Oh, ambassador. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
ambassador.
ambassador.
Okay.
So you're looking at one kind of car and you're pointing out, okay, maybe it's not the best car, but these are the things that are at least good about it, right? Now you look at the car that you really love and you could talk about it with lots of excitement. The important thing to understand is that energy doesn't lie. I want you to write that down.
Hmm.
Energy doesn't lie. So in order for you to help your child or to help a child understand the positive side of seeing a doctor, that's covered or that because it's going to look like an emergency and there's some energetic stress around
Fear.
that.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's fear around it. The difference is how you present that situation to the child and explaining to the child what's good about what's happening, right? Always seeking to upcycle that situation. Yeah, you know, he's wearing a mask or she's wearing a mask and it looks very scary, but understand that, you know, that person has gone to school for many years to help people have better health, right? That person is very educated to, to help in that situation. And in order to get the best outcome, they have to move really fast. So it looks scary, but just know that this is the good thing that's happening there. And it's just about putting it into perspective. Yeah, you know, the ambassador, that's what it's called, right? The ambassador,
Yeah.
not the best looking car, but understand that there were very skilled engineers that built that motor and that were able to make that car work. And so it serves a great purpose, even though it's maybe not the best to look at, or maybe it doesn't make you feel really cool to drive in it. Understand that there were some very skilled and brilliant people that went into making that car available, and look at how many people that car is serving in India.
Mhm.
I'll just rather add on to Gautam's question, so what happens, the way the whole process is approached in India when you encounter a COVID positive patient, doctors come dressed in all their entire PP suit, which is like, and then they come, they take you and everything. So children are getting to see these horrific sights. It's as if what kind of, the stigma is kind of really taking over. And like Gautam said something very rightly, even my children, who are much younger than Gautam's daughter, so what the experience is, they are sensing, I would not say they are seeing, but they're sensing a lot of fear, and they are not
it's energy
about that fear. And I think, Gregory, you said something very right. It's our role, it's our responsibility to explain and talk about it and put it in a perspective that is more upside than downside in it. So yes, Gautam, you very rightly said, children are not talking about it, but we have to open those communication lines. And I'm sure even Saif would kind of agree to him. His daughter is much younger than our children.
Yes, quite true.
Yeah, even with such young kids, when they see all this kind of things happening, that negativity happening, they sense it, and they are much more sensitive than us.
True.
Yeah, but
it's
yes,
very important. It's very important as parents, especially, to be proactive, because again, it goes back to this principle that energy doesn't lie.
yes.
And if you can pick up or you can sense, that there is some fear, like, for instance, if you're walking and holding hands with the child and the child gets fearful, what's the first thing, even if you can't see the face of the child, what's the first thing that you notice that they're feeling fear? The squeeze of the hand, right?
Yep.
The squeeze of the hand.
Squeeze the hand.
Use every opportunity that you can to recognize the energy and to address it, because the more that they see that you're connected to their experience, they will start to open up more. Oh, Daddy knows that I'm afraid. I don't know how Daddy knew, but Daddy could tell that I'm afraid, and he asked me about it. And the next time I'm afraid, maybe I'll say something, right? But it's building that emotional connection and being willing to be vulnerable as parents, because let's face it, in most societies, we as men are being told in the media and in the movies that we must be strong, right? That we must, have this strong exterior. And we know that it's a bunch of BS as soon as we have a daughter, right? That, oh my gosh, that we realize, oh, okay, maybe I'm not so strong. I start to melt a little bit, right? But we have to tune into the emotional energy and be willing to talk about that. We can demonstrate strength by helping to put the meaning of these things into perspective, and being willing, when we see the emotional cues, to bring it up, not wait always for them to talk about it. You can go to a child, especially even younger children, and say, I noticed that you seem a little scared, or I noticed that you might be feeling a little fear. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to share with me what's worrying you. And even if they say, oh, no, I'm not that scared, and say, okay, well, just know that if you feel scared, we can talk about it. I'm here. And being present with them and letting them know that feelings are an okay thing to talk about it. But they're going to take your cues, which means that when you notice that they're feeling scared, or if you suspect they may, or if you both see something and you think, wow, if I was a child that age, that would scare me, that should be a cue for you to check in and say, hey, we just saw this thing, right? Whatever it is. We just saw, that person being taken by ambulance. How did that make you feel? What are you feeling about that? And be willing to ask for them to open up. Be willing to take the lead and create that willingness to talk about emotions, because it's a very vulnerable thing. And we're taught by the media, not to really address it, to be strong. And so it takes a little practice, getting vulnerable in that situation. Does that help?
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes,
So
Gautam, please go ahead.
maybe we have to get them ready for similar, God forbid, similar things in future. Maybe our life, we are in 40, 50s. They have the full life. So maybe it's the first time they are experiencing. Maybe during their lifetime they will see similar things coming up. So they should be, as a parent, we should make them understand that these kind of things are here to stay.
Yeah. Good point, Gautam. If you look back historically, how many pandemics or how many disease outbreaks have we all seen in the news?
During my lifetime, this is first one. The last one happened in 1918. Maybe my parents or my grandparents. During this 1918, which one was that?
In Spanish
that fever was there.
Spanish
Okay,
fever.
so
fever, the last time
maybe India wasn't affected as much by H1N1. See, maybe India
it
missed
was
out.
there, but little. Yeah.
Yeah. See, in
Less.
America, if you look at the numbers of H1N1 in America,
It's huge.
it was astronomical.
Yeah.
And so, but using history, right, and saying, look, this isn't the first time this has happened. And one of the most beautiful things that you can ever present is that the world is still here. We are still here.
We have to stay.
Yeah, we're here, and these are things that happen, and just reinforcing the fact that they will be able to choose their experience. You can tell them some people are going to be very fearful, but you don't have to be. You have permission not to buy into all of the fear that the media is selling.
Very true. Very true. Siddhant, I hope you're not getting bored because you don't have wife and kids, at least none. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm intently listening, and I do have a question for you, Gregory.
Yeah.
So my question is largely related to the same thing that you were talking about right now. Not just kids, even us adults. We tend to be driven by fear at times of uncertainty, and this is a time when everything seems to be uncertain. So from an organizational point of view, all of us, we do have a vision, but it comes along with the baggage of uncertainty. So for a leader, rather than driving things with fear, because that comes naturally to everyone in the organization, be it an employee, be it everyone from top down, they're driven more by fear. The moment things open up, we need to get back on track. But on a usual business day, like you said, even if there is a challenge, there is still some motivation. There is not as much uncertainty. So for a leader who's running an organization or trying to drive things further, what would you suggest as not just as a best practice, but as something more of a driving force that they can implement at this point of time? Because not everyone is having this dialogue. So and it's more of
as a leader, dialogue. I would exponentialize how much I'm casting vision. Now, it's important. One of my early mentors taught me this principle, and you guys want to write this down. The target doesn't move. The target never moves, right? Now, you guys had targets or you had vision. It might, the path to getting to that vision might adjust, and you might have to make, capitulation, or you might have to make slight movements either to the right or to the left, but the target never moves. The target is always there. And that's what should be the reminder that leaders, the best leaders, create a feeling of safety, security, and trust, right? And where there is no vision, well, that's when people perish. That's when things fall apart. So you have to increase the amount of vision that you're casting to compensate for whatever else is being thrown at them from the outside. That you have to be proactive in equal or greater proportion than what is being thrown at them. And so that just comes with casting vision and consistently not just reminding them that the vision is there, but asking them to share and to verbalize what their understanding is of the vision, and helping them verbalize what they can do within their area of operation to take the team in the direction of the vision. And when people verbalize, then they become empowered. When you get them to talk about what they can do, when you get them to talk about their specific contributions and capabilities, the whole level of energy increases, and people will realize that, okay, yeah, the building may be on fire, but I know where the fire escape is, and this is what I can do to get there. Does that help?
Right. Yes, of course.
Okay.
And I think
Awesome.
I'll just do a little add on to this. So sometimes I feel some leaders feel that it is easier to motivate with fear. It's quicker. I mean, you get quicker results. The results could be short term. They're very short term. So once and often we had this kind of discussion, and I realized they're much more, like you just said. They're better ways of motivation by sharing the vision, by making part of the journey to achieve that vision. That kind of motivation gives results which are more sustainable, more lasting.
I'm going to share something, and I feel inspired to share this principle, or to kind of bring this up, because I think this really speaks to what Siddhant is asking. So how many of you have ever been in school and the teacher maybe fell ill for a little while and you had a substitute come in?
Quite often.
I think all of
how
us.
do the kids treat the substitute?
Depends on the substitute, to be honest.
Yeah, they usually treat the substitute pretty poorly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, there's a reason for that. And this is probably one of the most powerful leadership concepts I've ever learned. A child will not perform for an adult with whom they feel no connection, right? With whom they're not properly bonded. And so good teachers understand that they have to form that bond or that connection. And that goes back to this idea, because even though the child may not know how to articulate it, what they want to know is, do you care about me? Do you make me feel safe? Do I know that you believe in me? Right? And that doesn't change as adults. And so when the pressure of the outside and when the adversity increases, the level of connection that you have with your people must increase as well, because they're looking for those safety cues. And that requires bonding, right? That requires being connected. And this may sound counterintuitive in some cultures, but that's when the leader does their best to equalize the understanding that we're both humans. I know that you have needs. I want you to know that I understand your needs. Yes, I may hold this position in the company and you may report to me, but that doesn't mean that what you're feeling and what you're experiencing is any less important than what I'm feeling and experiencing. That I'm here to help you know that I have your best interest at heart. And the more they feel that collegiality, the more likely they will be to lock on to the direction that you're going, and they'll move forward in spite of fear because they believe in you. It's because they want to perform for you the same way that the connected child wants to perform for their parents or for the teacher. This is why step parenting does not work very good at first, because there is no bond, there is no connection. The stepchild does not have the desire to perform for the step parent until that step parent has invested enough to give that child a feeling of safety, security, and attachment. And that's the key to lead your people through this type of a situation. It's making sure that you go the extra mile to connect and attach, and they'll want to perform for you.
That's such a beautiful concept. I mean, it's not only between a child finding a connect with an elder to perform, but I think the same goes in the organization.
It does. It carries into adulthood.
Yeah. Even, sometime me and Gautam have interacted. He is working with a Korean company with Korean bosses, which are tough taskmasters. So, we sometimes really talk about it, and we feel that, what you just said is really needed to have that connect. And when you have that connect, you will go all out to perform for it.
Yeah. If the relationship is purely structural, yes. Right? And what I mean by the organization, if it's purely structural, I'm the boss. And that's the lowest level of leadership. Mm-hmm. There has to be collegiality. There has to be connection. I have to know that you know that I'm human too, right? And that you make me feel safe and you make me feel valuable, and you show me the ways in which you recognize that I'm contributing.
So it's very similar to, you just advised Gautam also, when your child is in fear, you have to pick up the clues when he's clenching your hand, when he's giving that tight thing. I think the same thing goes between like a leader and a colleague relationship, that a good leader should know when my colleague or when my team member is clenching that fist. I have to pick up those clues of fear and then open channels of communication to let him know that, how he's contributing, or maybe how he's aligned, and how he can be, a source or wheels to the reaching destination.
So, but and letting them know that their position is secure, because I mean, how many of us have been in a situation where maybe we're commuting into work and we're feeling, oh, today's the day they're going to fire me, because you start not feeling good about your situation. And so you start thinking your performance is bad and I'm not doing a good job, and maybe I'm not important to the company. And there was a period in my life, back when I was with Clear Channel, where every day I thought that I was going to get into the office and this is the day they're going to tell me that I don't have a job, because nobody in the organization made me feel safe.
Yes.
And that's miserable. It's really a bad place to be.
In personal and professional relationship, both, safety is very important. Safety of, safety has various meaning to it, but very important. Seth, you unmuted. Is it something that you want to say?
Well, I was just concluding on this remark that behavioral responses can be the best judgment factors to see how we are being perceived and what the levels of the connection can be made by those behavioral responses. Just going to add that.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yes.
So, well, it's interesting because, the market gives clues, the market will give off indicators, and sometimes, the market can be saying one thing, but, what's happening is completely different. Now, I'll give an example, and now we'll start getting into economic theory. But for instance, if you look at a large manufacturing organization that says, we're cutting our employers by 1,000 and we're letting 1,000 people go, and we're actually changing location, right? That market signal might tell somebody, oh, I better sell off my stock that I have in that company. That sounds really bad. They're getting rid of 1,000 people. But then they make the announcement, and in 60 or 90 days, their stock goes, right? It goes through the roof. And that's because of how, again, the meaning that we give to what the market signal is, right? And so we have to be careful that we don't jump to conclusions, that if we see a market signal, it's like, if a doctor says, oh, I think you have a cold, and then you seek a second opinion, and then the doctor says, yeah, well, it looks like a cold, but really you have a sinus infection. It's always best to, if we see a signal in the marketplace, to do a little research and to maybe look for a second opinion before we jump to conclusions based on one source of information. Now, if we start to see more of a trend, or we start to see a climate change in the marketplace, then we can respond. But the key is to respond, not to react, right? In fact, one of the things that I teach in coaching about how to deal with obstacles is always to just, when you're met with, say, like a bad market signal, that's an obstacle. The best thing is just to relax, right? Just to don't get reactionary, and then to distance yourself from whatever's happening so that you can have some time to take a look at it, right? That you want to assess the situation. And then you look and you say, okay, this market signal is going on. What's actually happening in my organization? And does it look like we're moving in the direction of or away from what our target is? And if you notice that you are not moving in the right direction, it gives you an opportunity to make some adjustment, right? To make adjustments so that you're back on track to heading toward the target. But the key thing is, anytime you're looking at market signals, to always get a second opinion, do a little due diligence in a relaxed state before, taking action, because sometimes we'll take action too soon, or we'll take a defensive action, and, the market is actually going in a different place than what we thought that we saw. So hopefully that's helpful.
So in fact, Gregory, I have a question coming up from this, and I think Dan, Gautam, and we can more relate to it because we faced it in the corporate world. So, but Seth, this is the real reality of things are. So sometimes we see, we have leaders which are very number driven, graph driven, Excel sheet driven. They go purely by facts. Their decisions are all logical. They go by pure data interpretation. Then you have another set of leaders, who have a feeling side of it also. Okay.
Yep.
How things would be. So they are numbers, but there has to be there has to be a motivation, something that fuels, the real doers or the real achievers on the ground, who would come forward and do it, right? So what right blend,
That's a good question.
Maybe you can rephrase it better.
Yeah, well. So what you're describing is you're describing the difference between technical analysis and fundamental analysis, right?
Yes.
If you are analyzing financial markets, technical analysis is the spreadsheet. You're looking at prospectus, historical performance, and how those types of trends drive direction. Fundamental analysis is looking purely at what the news is saying, right? And there are people that trade financial markets based on one or the other. But the key, I think, like you said, is
I'll just interrupt here, just to put it in more perspective. It's like this is more from an organizational point of view.
No, I understand. I'm just using this as a way
as an example.
As an example, right?
Okay.
So to find the blend is you have to look at historically what has proven to be true or what has proven to work, right? If the interesting thing about management. And it's interesting because let's say that you started at the bottom of a company and you worked your way up to where you're, maybe the CFO, right?
Okay.
The pitfall is to say, I've been there before, and based on based on what's on the spreadsheet, I can see what the problem is and I can fix it, right? The pitfall is not recognizing when you're too far away from the situation to actually be able to solve it, right? And even when you recognize on paper, or you recognize, the market data that there is an issue, the key is to be willing to involve or to trust people that are closer to the issue than you are, to actually be able to assist in making any necessary fixes or adjustments, right? Not getting so invested in what you think is the problem or what you think is the solution that you're not willing to trust and involve other people to be part of that solution. Because the tendency in times of fear is to want to control, especially if you're a leader, right? Leaders naturally want to start to try to control things, and they want to, and leaders get reactionary and can get defensive, and they start playing from a defense, right? Then keeping focused on the vision and moving in offense. And it really requires that when you may see the data and it may say that this thing is going on, but the key is not to start to get over controlling, because that can lead to self-sabotage, and it could lead to people losing their trust for you as a leader.
Indeed. Very nice. Very nicely put. So guys, I think we have taken a lot of time from Gregory, and he's been such a nice person, patiently answering all our questions and really, really coping up with us. So before we say thank you, anything else, gentlemen, you would like to put forward, or maybe a feedback, or maybe just like whatever, the feeling that you take away from this session? I would not call it feedback. I would always say, okay, the feeling that you take away from this session.
That's
How
good.
were you feeling when the session started, and how you're feeling now when we are ending it? You can share the word. It'll be so nice. So we can start with Gautam. Yeah. Okay, Seth, please take over.
The point that Gregory made about how much suffering we inflict on ourselves by being affected by the pain that we experience is one of my key takeaways from this session, because the amount of effect a pain can have, the suffering we inflict on, if that thing is totally under our control. So that point is certain golden keywords that I had wrote many of those things down. So I would be sharing among my students also. So that was a very good key point. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Seth.
Gautam, you have something to say?
Nothing. I appreciate your, answer to my query, and it was quite informative and knowledgeable to us. I think that will make us prepare for, such instances and situations, and I think we are better prepared now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sudan, before we go, yes.
Gregory, I think you pointed out to a lot of key factors that will help us, but I think the biggest takeaway for me was maintaining the right temperament and looking within ourselves even while making decisions, and the fact that you spoke about belief, which is not only in us but also other people, be it in leadership or at home, looking for key markers, understanding people better. I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
So thanks
Thank
a lot.
you so much.
This was really enlightening. A lot of good ways,
Thank you very
different
much.
perspectives.
So I will also put my takeaway from this session. So something which I have always admired is really putting the fundamental in place. And I think the basic fundamental he put in place is about, that soundtrack example he gave, that for every video or every movie that you're seeing, the soundtrack is the one that actually creates that feeling in you, So that soundtrack is nothing but my own internal dialogue with myself. How I see and how I feel is what actually happens in front of me. Is a reflection of how the outside world will be. So yes, I will try to keep my internal dialogue more clear, more open, and try to soundtrack better than before. Hopefully I'll benefit from it. Very nice.
And gentlemen, feel
Yes.
free to connect to me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or whatever social media you use. And if you ever have questions, I'm here to offer support.
Meanwhile, I've already sent a request on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect.
Because I work with one of those great minds who can sell $150,000 bear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So thank you so much, everybody, and especially thank you, Gregory.
Thank you, Gregory.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Asim.
Gregory.
Having me.
Thank you, Asim,
Thank
for
you.
organizing this. Thanks a
It
lot.
has been my pleasure and my honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.